All right, let's dive into a really crucial and honestly, a tough period in American history, African American resistance from 1800 to 1848. What we're going to explore is this incredible clash between a system literally designed to crush the human spirit and the absolute tenacious will to fight back against it.
You know, at its very core, the story of this era is this constant push and pull. On one side, you have this systematic psychological war to dehumanize an entire people, and on the other, this constant, powerful resistance. And we're not just talking about big, flashy rebellions, but the everyday, moment-to-moment acts to reclaim and hold on to one's humanity.
So, to really get the full picture of the resistance, we have to first look squarely at the brutality of this system itself. And it's so important to remember, this wasn't just about physical chains. It was a calculated psychological war.
See, slaveholders had to build this whole story, this narrative that portrayed enslaved people as something less than human. It was the only way they could justify the whole institution. But here's the thing. Every single act of resistance, whether it was big or small, was a direct challenge to that lie. It was a powerful declaration of humanity that forced the system to look at the very truth it was trying so hard to deny.
And of course, this constant pushback created a deep sense of fear among slaveholders. So what was their reaction? More repression. After major events like Nat Turner's Rebellion, this wave of panic swept through the South, leading to even harsher slave codes. We're talking about laws designed to break the human spirit, making it illegal to teach someone to read or write, outlawing marriage, completely shutting down any access to the courts. It was a full-on effort to maintain total control by stripping away the most basic human rights.
But here's the incredible part. That kind of pressure, it didn't crush hope. No way. In fact, it often channeled that energy into even bolder, more direct forms of resistance. This period saw some incredibly brave, open rebellions that sent absolute shockwaves through the entire system.
And make no mistake, these were not just isolated incidents. When you look at the timeline, you see a clear pattern. You've got the German Coast Uprising in Louisiana, Nat Turner's Rebellion in Virginia, the Amistad Mutiny out on the high seas. Each one of these was an organized, powerful expression of the unwavering desire for freedom, and they absolutely terrified the slaveholding class.
Just take the German Coast Uprising back in 1811. We're talking hundreds of people. Hundreds. It was the largest revolt of enslaved people in the entire history of the United States. They grabbed whatever they could get their hands on, axes, hoes, some guns, and they actually organized themselves into military-style companies with one goal: march on New Orleans and win their freedom. Now, it was brutally put down, there's no question, but it sent a clear message. Large-scale, organized resistance was always there, always simmering just under the surface.
Then you jump forward to 1831. Nat Turner's Rebellion absolutely shakes Virginia to its core. Around 60 white people were killed, and that number sent a jolt of pure fear through the entire institution of slavery.
Nat Turner was this deeply religious man, a preacher, who truly believed he was on a divine mission, and his rebellion created this powerful two-sided legacy. The immediate backlash, as you can imagine, was violent and severe. But his name became a potent symbol. On one hand, a figure of terror for slaveholders, and on the other, a profound symbol of hope and resistance for the enslaved.
And then we get a completely different kind of victory. The year is 1841. In a landmark ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, declares the captives of the slave ship Amistad to be free people.
I mean, the story itself is just incredible. You have enslaved Africans who revolt on a Spanish ship, take control, and demand to be sailed back home to Africa. Instead, they end up in the United States, and their case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, where they're defended by none other than former President John Quincy Adams. It was a huge legal win that challenged the very idea of slavery and inspired abolitionists everywhere.
But the fight wasn't just happening with weapons or in courtrooms. Some of the most powerful movements were being waged with the voice and with the pen, especially within the growing free Black communities in the North.
Take a guy like James Forten in Philadelphia. Here was a successful, wealthy, free Black businessman, a sailmaker, and he used his economic independence as a weapon. He funded abolitionist newspapers, he organized meetings, he fought for civil rights. He was living proof that economic power, when you could get it, could be directly translated into political power.
Righteousness exalteth a nation. I mean, what a powerful motto. This was the banner for Freedom's Journal, and it really captured everything it was about. This was so much more than a newspaper. It was a mission statement.
You really can't overstate how much of a game-changer this was. Founded in 1827, Freedom's Journal was the very first newspaper in the United States to be owned and edited by African Americans. Think about that. Before this, black perspectives were either completely ignored or totally twisted by the mainstream press. This paper gave people a platform to fight back against racist ideas, to advocate for abolition, and crucially to connect black communities across the country into a single, powerful conversation.
Okay, so beyond the open rebellions and the political activism, there was another, maybe quieter, but just as profound form of resistance. And that was the active preservation and creation of a rich, vibrant culture. This was the inner fight for humanity.
This inner resistance was happening all the time, and these everyday acts, things like naming practices, secretly keeping African names alive as a quiet but firm statement of who you were. In oral traditions, passing down folktales like the Brer Rabbit stories, which were filled with hidden lessons about how to outsmart the powerful and survive. And of course, through music and dance, which kept that spiritual connection to Africa alive.
Now, religion was another really fascinating arena for this cultural resistance. And there's a key idea here we need to understand: religious syncretism. It's basically the blending of different beliefs. And in this context, it was the process of taking Christianity and weaving it together with African traditions, turning it into a powerful tool of defiance. So this spiritual resistance really went down two main paths. On one side, you had people like Omar ibn Said, who was this educated Muslim scholar who secretly held on to his original faith his entire life while enslaved. But on the other hand, you had entire communities that took Christianity and completely reshaped it. They blended it with African traditions and focused on stories of liberation, like Moses leading his people out of Egypt. They took a religion that was often used to justify their enslavement and turned it into a powerful source of hope and spiritual freedom.
And all of this culture needed a place to live and breathe. In Boston, you have the African Meeting House. It was so much more than just a church. It was a political hub, a school, a center for the abolitionist movement. And then, down in New Orleans, you had Congo Square, this incredible public space where, for a few hours every Sunday, enslaved and free black people could gather and openly celebrate their African heritage through music and dance. It was a true incubator of culture. So, when you step back and look at all of this together, what does it all mean? What you see is this amazing, powerful duality, a system of absolute, brutal dehumanization being met at every single turn by a creative, resilient, and deeply human resistance.
From the most dramatic rebellions to the quietest acts of cultural survival, the real story of this period is one of just an unyielding will to survive, to claim your own dignity, and to never, ever stop pursuing freedom, even against the most impossible odds. So that leaves us with a pretty big question, one to really think about. How does understanding all of these different kinds of resistance, the loud and the quiet, the physical and the spiritual, how does that challenge or maybe deepen the way you think about what freedom and power actually are? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in the loudest battle, but in the quiet, tenacious, unbreakable act of just holding on to who you are.